The floorboards in our 1900s Victorian creaked like old bones as I padded barefoot through the hallway at 2:30 in the morning. Thunder rolled across our small New England town, rattling the windows that Alicia had insisted we restore to their original wavy glass. Everything in this house had to be perfect for her image. Everything except our marriage, apparently. I heard the kitchen door close with that soft click she thought was silent. My wife of 12 years was sneaking in again, and this time I was ready for her. "Late night at Jenny's baby shower?" I called out from the top of the stairs, my voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. Alicia froze in the foyer below, her hand still on the doorknob. Even in the dim light filtering through the storm clouds, I could see her shoulders tense. She was wearing that black dress, the one that hugged her curves and made every man in our dying mill town take a second look. The dress she claimed was too fancy for anywhere local. "Greg, you scared me." Her voice had that practiced sweetness that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my stomach turn. "I thought you were asleep." "Hard to sleep when your wife's side of the bed stays cold until 3 a.m. I descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. My days as an amateur boxer might be behind me, but I still moved like a man who knew how to handle himself. Especially when she comes home smelling like cologne that isn't mine. Alicia's laugh sounded forced, brittle. "You're being paranoid again, honey. You know how you get when work stress—" "Cut the bullcrap, Alicia." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. She blinked, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? Or maybe just annoyance that her carefully constructed lie was crumbling. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, but her voice wavered. "I know you've been lying to me for months." I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood there, arms crossed, blocking her path to our bedroom. "I know you think I'm too stupid to notice the late nights, the new underwear, the way you guard your phone like it's the crown jewels. Greg, please, you're scaring me." "Good. Maybe you should be scared." I stepped closer, and she backed against the door. "Because I found your other phone, Alicia. The one you thought you hid so well in the attic." The color drained from her face like water from a broken dam. Her mouth opened and closed silently, and I knew I had her. "That's right. Your little backup phone with all those sweet messages from Dominic Vega. Remember him? My old high school rival who you swore you couldn't stand?" I pulled out the pink iPhone she'd been hiding behind our Christmas decorations. "Funny how your opinion of him changed, especially after reading what you two have been doing in his wife's bed while Susie's at work." Alicia's composure shattered completely. Tears started streaming down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her like I had for 12 years. Just cold, calculating fury. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Really? Because what I think is that my wife has been screwing around with Dominic Vega for the past 6 months. What I think is that her best friend Susie has been helping arrange these little meetings. What I think is that half the town knows about it except the poor, stupid husband." "Greg, I can explain." "Explain this." I scrolled through the phone and found one of their more explicit conversations. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Greg's working late, so we have all night." That was last Tuesday, Alicia. The night you said you were helping Susie with her mother's estate sale. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "It just happened, Greg. I never meant for it to go this far." "Just happened? For 6 months? With my biggest enemy from high school? In his wife's bed while she's covering for you?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what just happened, Alicia? I just realized I've been married to a stranger. Please, we can work through this. I'll end it with Dominic, I swear. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend you didn't throw away 12 years for a quick thrill with that steroid-pumped moron?" I shook my head. "You made your choice, sweetheart. Now you get to live with the consequences." I turned and headed for the door, grabbing my keys from the hook. "Where are you going?" Panic crept into her voice. "Somewhere I can think without looking at your lying face." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "Oh, and Alicia? You might want to call Dominic and Susie. Let them know their little secret isn't so secret anymore." The rain hit me like a cold slap as I stepped into the storm, but it felt cleaner than the poisoned air inside our house. My house, actually, since I'd bought it with money from my renovation business before we got married. Another fact that was about to become very important. I drove through the empty streets of our small town, past the abandoned paper mill that had once employed half the population, past the row of shops struggling to stay afloat, until I reached the River Mill bar. The neon sign flickered in the rain, casting red and blue shadows on the wet pavement. Richie Kane was behind the bar, wiping down glasses even though it was well past closing time. He looked up as I walked in, water dripping from my clothes. Jesus, Greg, you look like hell. Feel worse. I slumped onto a bar stool. Pour me something strong, Rich. I just found out my wife's been playing house with Dominic Vega. Richie's hand froze on the bottle of whiskey. Ah, crap, I was hoping you wouldn't find out. You knew? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You ducking knew and didn't tell me? I heard rumors, but I wasn't sure. And even if I was... He poured 2 glasses and slid one across to me. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Greg, I think your wife's cheating on you with the guy who gave you a concussion senior year. I knocked back the whiskey, feeling it burn away some of the ice in my chest. How long has everyone been talking about it? Couple months, maybe more. You know how this town is. Someone sees Alicia's car at the Vega place when Susie's at work, word gets around. Richie leaned against the bar, his expression sympathetic but cautious. Dom's been bragging about it too, saying things about how he finally got something that belonged to you. That son of a bitch? My hands clenched into fists automatically. He's still fighting high school battles. Yeah, well, looks like he won this round. Did he? I looked up at my oldest friend and something cold and determined settled in my chest. The fight's not over yet, Rich. It's just getting started. Thunder crashed overhead and the lights in the bar flickered. When they steadied, Richie was staring at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. What are you thinking, Greg? I finished my drink and stood up, feeling steadier than I had in hours. I'm thinking it's time Dominic Vega learned what happens when you mess with the wrong man's family. The next morning, I sat in my workshop behind the house, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Saws, hammers, measuring tapes, and power tools that had built my reputation as the best renovation contractor in 3 counties. But today, I wasn't thinking about fixing things. I was thinking about breaking them. My phone buzzed with another text from Alicia, the 5th one since I'd left her crying in the foyer at 3 a.m. Greg, please come home so we can talk. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I love you. I deleted it without responding, just like I had the others. Love. She had a funny way of showing it. The workshop door creaked open, and I looked up to see Alicia standing there in her robe, eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked small and vulnerable, nothing like the confident physical therapist who commanded respect at the clinic. You didn't come to bed, she said quietly. I slept on the couch. Seemed more honest than sharing a bed with someone who's been sharing herself with half the town. She flinched like I'd slapped her. It wasn't half the town. It was just Dominic, and it didn't mean anything. Just Dominic? What about Susie's involvement? Those texts made it pretty clear this was a group activity. I set down the wrench I'd been holding and turned to face her fully. Tell me, Alicia, when you were in their bed, did you ever think about me? About what this would do to our marriage? Of course I did. That's why I felt so guilty all the time. Tears started flowing again. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. You could have started with not doing it in the first place. I know. I screwed up, Greg, but people make mistakes. We've been together for 12 years. Doesn't that count for something? I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with. All I saw was a stranger wearing her features. 12 years, I repeated. 12 years of me thinking I had a faithful wife while you were out playing games with my enemies. Tell me something, Alicia. How long have you been planning this? Because those texts go back 6 months. But the way you and Dominic talked, it seemed like you'd been thinking about it longer. She looked away and I had my answer. Jesus Christ, how long? It started as just fantasy, okay? Dominic would flirt with me at town events and I'd flirt back. It was harmless. When? I don't know, maybe 2 years ago? But nothing happened until... 2 years! The words hit me like a physical blow. You've been emotionally cheating on me for 2 goddamn years? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Alicia? Explain it to me, because I'm having trouble understanding how my wife of 12 years ends up in bed with the guy who put me in the hospital senior year. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young. You've been so distant lately. Working all the time, stressed about money, never wanting to go out or socialize. I felt invisible. So you decided to become very visible to Dominic Vega. He made me feel attractive again, desired. When was the last time you looked at me the way he does? I stood up slowly, my hands clenched at my sides. When was the last time you gave me a reason to? You've been cold and distant for months, Alicia. Now I know why. You were saving all your warmth for someone else. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you coming to me when you were feeling neglected. Fair would have been marriage counseling. Fair would have been divorce before you started screwing around. What you did was the opposite of fair. She took a step toward me, reaching out. Greg, please, we can get past this. I'll do whatever it takes. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. It's too late for that. No, it's not. I'll call Dr. Martinez. We can start counseling this week. I'll cut all contact with Dominic and Susie. I'll do anything. Anything except the one thing that might have mattered. You can't unduck him, Alicia. You can't take back 6 months of lies and betrayal. And you sure as hell can't make me forget that my wife chose my worst enemy over me. The workshop fell silent except for the sound of her crying. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. Just cold, calculating anger. I need you to leave, I said finally. This is my home too. Actually, it's not. This house is in my name. Bought with my money before we got married. Check the deed if you don't believe me. I turned back to my workbench. I want you out by tonight. You can't just throw me out. Watch me. And Alicia, tell your boyfriend and his wife that they picked the wrong man to mess with. This isn't over. She stood there for another minute, maybe hoping I'd change my mind. When I didn't look at her again, she finally left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before I picked up my phone and called my sister Nikki in Boston. She was a divorce attorney with a reputation for being ruthless, and right now, that's exactly what I needed. Greg, it's barely 9 a.m. This better be good. Alicia's been cheating on me for 6 months. I have proof. I need to know my options. There was a pause, then Nikki's voice turned professional. Are you somewhere you can talk freely? Yeah, she just left. Good. First things first, don't do anything stupid. No confronting the other man, no public scenes, no violence. That'll only hurt you in court. What about protecting my assets? The house is yours, right? Premarital property? Right. Good. What about joint accounts? I thought about our shared checking and savings accounts. We've got about $15,000 in joint accounts, maybe another 10 in her personal account. I'll file paperwork to freeze the joint accounts pending divorce proceedings. She won't be able to clean you out. Nikki's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, Greg. I know you loved her. Yeah, well, apparently the feeling wasn't mutual. I looked around the workshop at all the tools I'd used to build our life together. How long will this take? Depends on how nasty she wants to get. With proof of adultery and premarital property, you're in a strong position. But Greg? Yeah? Be smart about this. Don't let anger make you do something you'll regret. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my workshop and thought about Dominic Vega. We'd never liked each other, even before the incident senior year that left me with a concussion and him with a broken nose. He was everything I wasn't. Flashy, loud, the kind of guy who peaked in high school and spent the rest of his life trying to recapture that glory. Now he thought he'd won some kind of prize by stealing my wife. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I spent the rest of the morning making phone calls and doing research. By noon, I had a plan. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about making sure everyone in our small town knew exactly what kind of people Dominic, Alicia, and Susie really were. The first step was simple. I drove to the auto parts store and bought a few items. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. Then I headed to Dominic's neighborhood to do a little reconnaissance. He lived in a cramped bungalow on the wrong side of town, the kind of place that needed more work than it was worth. His pride and joy was parked in the driveway, a restored 1969 Camaro that he'd spent more money on than his house was worth. The car was his baby, his claim to fame, the thing he bragged about at every town event. It would be a shame if something happened to it. That night, I waited until well past midnight before making my move. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick and dark. Perfect conditions for what I had planned. I parked 3 blocks away from Dominic's house and walked the rest of the way, keeping to the shadows. His neighborhood was the kind where people minded their own business, where the streetlights were broken more often than they worked. The Camaro sat in his driveway like a sleeping beast, chrome gleaming even in the dim light. Dominic had spent years restoring this car, talking about it endlessly at the River Mill bar, showing pictures to anyone who'd listen. It was his pride and joy. his connection to his glory days as the high school quarterback who thought the world owed him something. I pulled on latex gloves and got to work. First, I let the air out of all 4 tires, not slashing them, nothing that would be obviously criminal. Just loosening the valve stems enough to let the air escape slowly. Then I took the expanding foam I'd bought at the hardware store and carefully filled his exhaust pipe. It would take hours for him to figure out why his precious car wouldn't start properly. But the real message came next. I pulled out my keys and carefully scratched "Homewrecker" across the hood, the metal shrieking softly in the night air. The sound made me wince, but I kept going. Dominic needed to know this wasn't random vandalism. Finally, I reached into my jacket and pulled out something I'd retrieved from my own attic earlier that day, Dominic's old boxing trophy from our senior year, the one he'd won in the regional championships before I knocked him out in an unsanctioned match behind the gym. I'd kept it all these years as a reminder of what I was capable of when pushed. I snapped the trophy in half and left it on his windshield, along with a note written in block letters, "You started this." The walk back to my truck felt like a victory lap. For the first time since discovering Alicia's betrayal, I felt like I was in control again. The next morning, I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang. Richie's name flashed on the screen. "Jesus Christ, Greg. Please tell me you had nothing to do with what happened to Dom's car." I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Someone trashed his Camaro last night. Tires flat, exhaust clogged, homewrecker keyed into the hood. And get this, they left his old boxing trophy on the windshield, snapped in half. Sounds like someone has a grudge against him. Can't imagine why." I couldn't keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "Greg, this is serious. Dom's furious. He's telling everyone you did it." "Let him tell whoever he wants. I was home all night, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. You need to be careful. This guy's not stable, and now you've humiliated him in front of the whole neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson saw the car this morning and called half the town before Dom even woke up." Perfect. I'd been hoping the gossip network would kick in quickly. "I appreciate the concern, Rich, but I can handle Dominic Vega." That's what I'm afraid of. After I hung up, I felt better than I had in months. The first shot had been fired, and Dominic knew exactly who was responsible. Now it was his move. I didn't have to wait long. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're smart, Rourke? This is just the beginning. You have no idea who you're messing with." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Nikki with a note. "Evidence of harassment from the other man." Her response came back immediately. "Perfect. Keep documenting everything. Don't respond to him directly." But I had no intention of responding directly. I had something much better planned. That afternoon, I drove to the clinic where Alicia worked. Not to confront her, that would be stupid and counterproductive. Instead, I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at exactly 2:30 p.m., Susie Vega pulled into the parking lot in her beat-up Honda Civic. She was there for her weekly physical therapy appointment, the one Alicia had been giving her at a friends and family discount for the past year. I watched as the 2 women embraced in the parking lot, Susie clearly upset about something, probably the state of her husband's precious car. They talked for several minutes before going inside together. That's when I made my second move. I walked into the clinic's lobby like any other customer and approached the receptionist, a young woman named Tracy, who I'd met at several town events. "Hi, Tracy. I'm here to pick up some paperwork for my wife, Alicia." "Oh, hi, Mr. Rourke. Let me get her for you." "Actually, don't bother her if she's with a patient. I just need to know, is she treating Susie Vega today?" Tracy checked her computer. "Yes, they're in room 3. Is there a message you want me to give her?" "Just tell her I stopped by." "Oh, and Tracy, you might want to know that Susie's been having an affair with her husband. Might want to be careful about what kind of people you're treating here." Tracy's eyes widened. "Mr. Rourke, I can't really... I'm not asking you to do anything. Just thought you should know the kind of drama that might be coming to your workplace." I smiled pleasantly. "Have a good day." I left before Tracy could respond, but I'd accomplished what I wanted. Within an hour, the entire clinic staff would know about the affair. Word would spread from there, to other patients, to their families, to the wider community. By evening, my phone was ringing constantly. Friends, neighbors, even people I barely knew calling to ask if it was true about Alicia and Dominic. I confirmed it politely but without details, playing the role of the wronged husband with dignity. The best call came from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. an elderly woman who'd always been fond of Alicia. "Greg, dear, I'm so sorry to hear about your troubles. I always thought Alicia was such a nice girl." "So did I, Mrs. Chen. So did I." "Well, if it helps, I saw that Vega man's car this morning. Someone certainly made their feelings clear." "I heard about that. Terrible thing, vandalism." "Oh, I don't think it was random vandalism, dear. I think someone was sending a message. And between you and me, it was a message that needed sending." After I hung up, I poured myself a beer and sat on my front porch, looking out at the quiet street. 2 days ago, I'd been the laughingstock of the town, the clueless husband whose wife was cheating with his high school rival. Now, public opinion was shifting. People were starting to see Dominic, Alicia, and Susie as the villains in this story. But I was just getting started. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Alicia. "I heard what you did to Dom's car. This has to stop before someone gets hurt." I typed back, "I didn't do anything to anyone's car, but you're right about one thing. Someone is going to get hurt. Just not who you think." The war was officially on. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, legal paperwork, and careful planning. Nikki had filed the divorce papers and frozen our joint accounts, which sent Alicia into a panic. She'd been staying at Susie's house, but without access to our shared money, she was quickly running out of options. Meanwhile, the gossip mill was working overtime. Everyone in town was talking about the affair, about Dominic's vandalized car, about the drama that was unfolding like a soap opera in their quiet little community. I was in the hardware store picking up supplies for a job when I overheard two women talking in the next aisle. "I always thought there was something off about that Susie Vega. Too friendly, if you know what I mean. And Alicia Rourke. I can't believe it. She seemed so devoted to Greg." "Well, you know what they say about still waters running deep. Poor Greg, though, he must be devastated." I smiled to myself as I loaded paint cans into my cart. The court of public opinion was firmly on my side now. That afternoon, I got a call from Tom Bradley, who owned the auto repair shop where Dominic had taken his Camaro. "Greg, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Dom Vega was in here today screaming about his car. He's convinced you're the one who vandalized it." "What did you tell him?" "I told him he'd better have proof before he goes around making accusations. But Greg, the guy's unhinged. He was talking about getting even, making you pay. I thought you should know." "I appreciate the heads up, Tom. There's something else, the damage to his car. It's going to cost him almost $3,000 to fix properly. The key scratches went right through to the metal, and the expanding foam in the exhaust damaged some internal components. $3,000. That was more than I'd expected, but it felt appropriate given what Dominic had cost me emotionally. That evening, I was working late in my shop when I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway. I looked up to see a familiar silhouette in the doorway. Susie Vega, looking nervous and angry. "We need to talk," she said, stepping into the light. Susie had always been the kind of woman who tried too hard. Too much makeup, too tight clothes, too loud at parties. She was attractive in an obvious way, but there was something desperate about her that had always made me uncomfortable. "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Susie." "The hell we don't. You need to stop this campaign against my husband." I set down my tools and turned to face her fully. "Campaign? I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb, Greg. The car, the gossip, turning the whole town against us. It has to stop. Maybe you should have thought about that before you helped my wife cheat on me." Her face flushed red. "That's not how it happened." "No? Then why don't you tell me how it did happen? Because those text messages painted a pretty clear picture of your involvement." Susie shifted uncomfortably, wrapping her arms around herself. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. Alicia was unhappy, and Dom gets what he wants. I thought if I just let it happen, it would burn itself out." "So you offered up your bed and your marriage to help them have their affair?" "I offered to be a friend. Alicia needed someone to talk to, and I—" "You what? Decided to pimp out your husband to my wife?" I stepped closer, and she backed toward the door. "Or maybe you were getting something out of it, too." Those texts suggested this was more than just Dom and Alicia. The guilt on her face told me everything I needed to know. This hadn't been a simple affair. It had been some kind of twisted arrangement between all three of them. Jesus Christ, Susie, what kind of people are you? "We're not bad people, Greg. Things got complicated." "Complicated? You helped destroy my marriage for kicks, and you call it complicated?" She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I never meant for it to hurt you. I thought you didn't care about Alicia anymore. What gave you that impression? She said you were distant, that you barely touched her anymore, that you were more interested in your work than your wife. So you decided to fix that by setting her up with your husband. I thought maybe if she had an outlet, she'd be happier at home. I thought it would save your marriage, not destroy it. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process the twisted logic. You are either the stupidest person I've ever met, or you're lying to my face. I'm not lying. Then you're stupid. Did you really think I wouldn't find out in a town this size? We were careful. Careful? Susie, you were texting about it on phones, meeting in your house when half the neighborhood could see Alicia's car in your driveway. If that's your idea of careful, no wonder your marriage is a joke. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Don't talk about my marriage. Your marriage? What marriage? You're married to a man who's screwing around with other women while you watch. That's not a marriage. That's a pathetic arrangement between broken people. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're so desperate for attention that you'll share your husband with other women just to feel involved in something. And now that it's blown up in your face, you want me to make it all go away. Please, Greg. Dom's talking about doing something to you. Something bad. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me? Where was this protective instinct when you were helping my wife cheat? That's different. No, it's not. You made your choice, Susie. All three of you did. Now, you get to live with the consequences. She stood there for another moment, tears streaming down her face. This isn't over. You're right about that. It's not even close to over. After she left, I pulled out my phone and called Richie. I need a favor, I said when he answered. What kind of favor? The kind that involves your security cameras and your cousin who works at the phone company? There was a pause. Greg, what are you planning? I'm planning to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they're dealing with. This is getting dangerous, man. Maybe you should just let the divorce handle it. The divorce will give me my freedom, Rich, but it won't give me justice. What's the difference? I looked around my workshop at all the tools I'd used to build a life that had been torn apart by lies and betrayal. Justice is making sure they pay for what they did. All of them. The annual River Days Festival was the biggest event in our small town's social calendar. For 3 days every summer, the main street was closed to traffic and filled with vendor booths, carnival rides, and a beer garden that drew people from 3 counties. It was the kind of wholesome small-town celebration that looked perfect on the surface, but seethed with gossip and drama underneath. This year, it was going to be the stage for my final act. I spent the morning setting up my booth for work renovation, shaking hands with neighbors and potential customers, playing the role of the dignified, wronged husband. People were sympathetic, supportive, eager to show they were on my side in the great drama that had consumed our town. Greg, I'm so sorry about what you're going through, said Martha Phillips, who ran the flower shop. I always thought Alicia was better than that. People surprise you sometimes, I replied with just the right amount of sadness. Not always in good ways. Around noon, I spotted them across the crowded street, Dominic, Alicia, and Susie, trying to look normal as they browsed the vendor booths. But I could see the tension in their body language, the way people's conversations stopped when they approached, the cold shoulders and turned backs that followed them through the crowd. They were already pariahs, but I wasn't done with them yet. I waited until they were near the beer garden, where the largest crowd was gathered, before I made my move. I walked over with a beer in my hand, looking casual and relaxed. Dominic, good to see you, buddy. My voice carried across the crowd, loud and friendly. How's that beautiful Camaro of yours running? Dominic turned, his face flushing red with anger. You son of a bitch. Whoa, what's with the hostility? I was just asking about your car. I heard someone vandalized it. Terrible thing, vandalism. People were starting to stare, conversations stopping as they sensed drama brewing. This was exactly what I wanted. You know damn well what happened to my car, Dominic snarled, stepping closer. I really don't. But hey, these things happen when you make enemies, right? I took a sip of my beer, perfectly calm. Maybe you should think about why someone would want to hurt your precious car. Greg, please. Alicia stepped between us, her voice pleading. Not here. Not here? But this is perfect, don't you think? All our friends and neighbors, everyone who's been talking about our little situation. I gestured to the crowd that was now openly watching us. Why don't we give them the real story? Greg, don't, Susie whispered, but her voice was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. See, folks, my wife Alicia here has been having a little affair with my old high school buddy Dominic, and Susie, his lovely wife, has been helping them out. Isn't that sweet? Like a modern family arrangement? The crowd gasped, and I saw phones coming out, people starting to record. Perfect. You're lying, Dominic said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Alicia, honey, do you want to tell everyone how this isn't true? How you haven't been sneaking around with Dom for the past 6 months? Alicia's face was white as paper, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please stop. Stop? But we're just getting to the good part. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. See, I have recordings of some very interesting conversations. Would you like me to play them for everyone? You bastard! Dominic lunged forward, but I was ready for him. I stepped aside easily, letting his momentum carry him past me, and he stumbled into a nearby table, sending beer cups flying. The crowd laughed, and I saw him realize how foolish he looked. Careful there, Dom. You always were better at sucker punches than fair fights. He came at me again, this time with his fists raised. I didn't try to avoid him. Instead, I let him throw the first punch, ducking under his wild swing and coming up with a perfectly placed slap across his face. The sound echoed across the suddenly silent crowd like a gunshot. Dominic staggered back, more shocked than hurt, his hand rising to his reddened cheek. Did you just slap me? I did. Want me to do it again? I stood there calmly, hands at my sides, while he processed the humiliation of being slapped like a child in front of half the town. He charged again, and this time I grabbed him in a wrestling hold, using his momentum to take him down hard onto the grass. In seconds, I had him pinned, my knee on his chest, while he struggled uselessly beneath me. Here's the thing, Dom, I said quietly, just loud enough for the crowd to hear. You always thought you were tougher than me. But you were wrong in high school, and you're wrong now. I stood up and brushed off my hands while Dominic rolled over, gasping and humiliated. The crowd was dead silent, everyone staring at the man who'd just been dominated by someone they'd thought was a quiet, peaceful contractor. Now, I said, turning to address the crowd, I know everyone's been talking about this situation, and I appreciate all the support. But I want you to know the truth about what these 3 people did to my marriage. I pulled out my phone again and hit play on an audio file I'd prepared. Susie's voice filled the air, clear and unmistakable. I knew about Dom and Alicia for months, Greg. I helped them set it up. I thought it would be exciting, you know? Like a game. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps, angry mutters, the sound of people stepping away from Susie like she had a disease. That's not the whole conversation, Susie protested, but her voice was drowned out by the crowd's disapproval. Maybe not, I said, but it's enough. Everyone here now knows exactly what kind of people you are. I looked at each of them in turn. Dominic still on the ground, his face red with humiliation. Alicia sobbing openly as people she'd known for years turned their backs on her. Susie frantically trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. You wanted to play games with people's lives, I said. Well, here's the final score. I turned and walked away, leaving them to face the judgment of our community. Behind me, I could hear the crowd's voices rising, not in anger at me, but in support. They were cheering. As I reached the edge of the festival grounds, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Richie, grinning from ear to ear. Jesus Christ, Greg. I've never seen anything like that. You destroyed them. They destroyed themselves. I just made sure everyone could see it. Dom's not going to let this go, you know. He'll want revenge. I looked back at the festival, where Dominic was finally getting to his feet while Alicia and Susie tried to disappear into the hostile crowd. Let him come. I'm ready for whatever he's got. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't over. Dominic's humiliation was complete, but humiliated men do desperate things, and desperate men are dangerous. I just didn't care anymore. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Strong, confident, in control. Whatever came next, I could handle it. The festival continued around us, but the real entertainment was over. The story of Greg Rourke's revenge would be told and retold for years to come, growing in the telling until it became legend. And I was just getting started. The call came at 11:30 that night. I was sitting on my porch enjoying a beer and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done when my phone rang. Unknown number. You think you won today, Rourke? Dominic's voice was slurred with alcohol and rage. You think you can humiliate me in front of the whole town and just walk away? I think I already did walk away, Dom, along with most of your dignity. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Your wife knows what you are, my wife knows what she is, and the whole town knows what all three of you are. There's nothing left to fight about. There's plenty left to fight about. Meet me at the old paper mill in an hour, and we'll settle this like men. I almost laughed. Like men? Dom, real men don't screw around with other men's wives. Real men don't get their wives to help them cheat. And real men sure as hell don't get slapped down in front of a crowd and then make drunken phone calls for rematches. 1 hour, Rourke. If you don't show, I'm coming to your house. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, considering my options. I could call the police, report the threat. I could ignore him and see if he was stupid enough to actually come to my house. Or I could end this once and for all. I chose option 3. The old paper mill had been abandoned for over a decade, a victim of globalization and corporate downsizing. It sat on the banks of the river like a monument to better times, its broken windows and rusted machinery a reminder of what this town used to be. I parked behind the main building and walked through the shadows toward the loading dock where Dominic was waiting. He was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, a bottle of whiskey in one hand. "I didn't think you'd show," he said when he saw me. "I'm here. What do you want, Dom?" "I want you to admit that you're not better than me, that you never were." "But I am better than you. That's why I have a successful business while you're still working factory shifts. That's why people respect me while they cross the street to avoid you. And that's why I didn't need to steal another man's wife to feel good about myself." He threw the bottle aside and it shattered against the concrete. "You always thought you were so much smarter than everyone else." "Not everyone, just you." "We'll see about that." He came at me then, but he was drunk and sloppy, telegraphing his punches like an amateur. I slipped his first swing and caught him with a short right hand to the solar plexus that doubled him over. "Stay down, Dom. You're embarrassing yourself." But he wouldn't stay down. He never had been smart enough to know when he was beaten. He straightened up and charged again, this time managing to grab me around the waist in a clumsy tackle. We went down together, rolling across the dirty concrete, throwing wild punches that mostly missed their mark. For a moment, it felt like we were 18 again, settling our differences behind the high school gym. But we weren't 18 anymore. We were grown men with grown-up problems. And this fight was about more than high school rivalries. I managed to get on top of him and pin his arms with my knees. His face was bloody from where he'd scraped it on the concrete, and his eyes were wild with rage and alcohol. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I said, breathing hard. "To prove you're still the tough guy from high school? Get off me. Not until you understand something. I didn't take your wife away from you. You gave her away when you decided to screw around with mine. I didn't ruin your reputation. You did that when you started bragging about your conquests. And I didn't humiliate you today. You humiliated yourself by being exactly what everyone expected you to be. I said, get off me. You want to know why Alicia chose you over me? It wasn't because you're better looking or stronger or more successful. It's because you're exactly as shallow and selfish as she is. You deserved each other." I stood up and stepped back, leaving him gasping on the ground. "This is over, Dom. Go home to your wife and try to salvage what's left of your marriage. Because mine is done. And there's nothing left for you to take." He struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. "You think you're so smart. But you lost everything, too. Your wife, your marriage, your perfect life. No, I lost a cheating wife and a fake marriage. What I gained was self-respect and the knowledge that I'm better off without people like you in my life." I turned to walk away, but his voice stopped me. "She never loved you, you know. Alicia told me she was just settling when she married you. Said you were safe and boring, but never what she really wanted." I turned back to face him. "Maybe that's true, but at least she married me. You were just a midlife crisis with muscles." The look on his face told me I'd hit home. He'd thought he was the prize, the upgrade, the better choice. Now he was realizing he'd been nothing more than a temporary distraction. "You know what the funny thing is, Dom? In 6 months, when the gossip dies down and people move on to the next scandal, I'll still be here. I'll still have my business, my house, my reputation. But you? You'll still be the guy who destroyed his marriage for a cheap thrill. You'll still be the guy who got slapped down at the town festival. And you'll still be exactly what you've always been, a loser who peaked in high school." I left him there in the shadows of the abandoned mill, a broken man in a broken place. As I drove home through the quiet streets of our small town, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The next morning brought a steady stream of phone calls and visitors. Word of the previous night's confrontation had already spread. Apparently, someone had seen our cars at the mill and put two and two together. But the most important call came from Nikki. "The divorce papers are ready," she said. "Alicia's lawyer wants to settle quickly and quietly. Apparently, her new reputation is making it hard for her to find work." "What are they offering?" "She keeps her personal belongings and her car. You keep everything else: the house, the business, the retirement accounts. She's not even asking for alimony." "And in return?" "She wants you to stop talking about the affair publicly. She thinks it's hurting her job prospects." I laughed. "Tell her lawyer that ship has sailed. The whole town knows what she did, and I'm not going to lie to protect her feelings." I already did. The settlement stands either way. She doesn't have any leverage left. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and looked around at the house I'd worked so hard to restore. Every room held memories of the life I'd thought I was building with Alicia. But those memories felt distant now, like scenes from someone else's life. My phone buzzed with a text from Richie. "Dom and Susie's house is up for sale. Word is they're leaving town." I wasn't surprised. There was nothing left for them here except judgment and whispered conversations. They'd burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, all for a few months of excitement that had cost them everything. Another text came in, this one from a number I didn't recognize. "I'm sorry for everything. I know you'll never forgive me, but I want you to know I realize what I lost. A." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late to matter. That evening, I drove to the Rivermill bar for what felt like a victory celebration. The place was packed with people who wanted to buy me drinks, shake my hand, tell me how proud they were of the way I'd handled myself. "You're a legend, man," said Tommy Morrison, a guy I'd known since elementary school. "The way you took down Dom at the festival, that's going to be talked about for years." "I just stood up for myself," I replied. "Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, they wouldn't. Most guys would have just taken it or made a scene that made them look as bad as the cheaters. But you played it perfect." As the night wore on, I found myself thinking about what came next. The divorce would be final in a few weeks. The house was mine, the business was thriving, and my reputation in town was stronger than ever. For the first time in months, the future looked bright. Around midnight, as I was getting ready to leave, Richie pulled me aside. "I heard something you should know about," he said quietly. "Dom's been telling people he's not done with you. Says he's got something planned that'll make you sorry you ever messed with him." "Like what?" "I don't know. But be careful, Greg. A man with nothing left to lose can be dangerous." I looked around the bar at all the friendly faces, all the people who'd supported me through this ordeal. "Let him try. I've got this whole town watching my back now. Just promise me you won't get overconfident. This isn't over until they're actually gone." I promised, but I wasn't worried. Dominic had already played his best cards and lost. What else could he possibly do to hurt me? I was about to find out. 3 days later, I got my answer. I was working on a kitchen renovation across town when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of my biggest client, Robert Chen, who owned half the commercial real estate in the county. "Greg, I need to see you in my office immediately." "Is there a problem with the Morrison project?" "Just get over here. Now." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Chen in his downtown office, watching him shuffle through a stack of papers with a grim expression. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me," he said. "Have you ever used substandard materials on any of my properties?" "Of course not." "You know my work, Bob. I've never cut corners on anything." "What about the Henderson building renovation last year? The one where we had to replace all the electrical work 6 months later?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "That electrical work was fine when I left it. The problems came from water damage during that big storm in March." "That's not what this says." He slid a folder across the desk. "I received this anonymously yesterday. It contains photographs, receipts, and what appears to be documentation showing that you used substandard wiring and cut corners on the safety inspections." I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. The photos were real. They showed the electrical work in progress with what appeared to be cheaper materials than what I'd actually used. But something was wrong with them. "Bob, this is fake. Someone doctored these photos." "How can you be sure?" I pointed to one of the images. "Look at the date stamp. This says it was taken in November, but we didn't start the electrical work until January. And this receipt for the cheap wire? I've never bought materials from this supplier." Chen leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "So you're saying someone fabricated all of this to make you look bad?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think I know who." I pulled out my phone and called the electrical supplier listed on the fake receipt. After a brief conversation, I hung up and looked at Chen. They have no record of me ever buying anything from them, but they do have records of a cash purchase for these exact materials 3 days ago. The buyer gave the name Dom Vega. Chen's expression shifted from suspicion to understanding. "This is about your wife's affair, isn't it? Dominic Vega is trying to destroy my business because I exposed what he did to my marriage. He's fabricated evidence to make it look like I'm a corrupt contractor. Can you prove it?" "I can prove the receipts are fake and the photos are doctored. But the real question is, are you going to believe the word of a man you've worked with for 5 years or anonymous accusations from someone with an obvious motive to hurt me?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed the folder. "I've known you for 5 years, Greg. Your work has always been impeccable and you've never given me reason to doubt your integrity. But I have to ask, are there any other clients who might have received similar packages?" My phone was already ringing. Over the next hour, I fielded calls from 3 other major clients, all asking about anonymous packages they'd received containing similar evidence of my supposed corruption. By the end of the day, I'd managed to convince most of them that the accusations were false, but the damage was done. Word was spreading through the local business community that Greg Rourke might not be as reliable as people thought. That evening, I sat in Richie's bar, nursing a beer and trying to figure out my next move. "He's smarter than I gave him credit for," I admitted. "This could actually hurt my business." "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to end this once and for all. Greg, maybe it's time to just let it go. You won. Your wife's gone. Dom's humiliated. Everyone knows the truth. Why risk everything you've built for revenge?" "Because he's not just attacking me anymore. He's attacking my livelihood, my reputation, everything I've worked for." I finished my beer and stood up. I can't let that stand. "So what's the plan?" "I'm going to give Dominic Vega exactly what he's been asking for since this started. A fight he can't win." The next morning, I called in every favor I'd accumulated over 15 years in business. I talked to suppliers, inspectors, other contractors, anyone who might have information about Dominic's recent activities. What I found was better than I'd hoped for. Dominic had been sloppy in his attempt to frame me. The fake receipts could be traced back to him, the doctored photos had digital fingerprints that proved they'd been altered, and several people had seen him asking suspicious questions about my work methods. But more importantly, I discovered that Dominic's own construction work, he did odd jobs and small repairs on the side, was far from perfect. In fact, it was downright dangerous. I spent 2 days documenting every code violation, every shortcut, every safety hazard and work that Dominic had done around town. Then I compiled it all into a comprehensive report and sent copies to the building inspector, the Better Business Bureau, and every client who'd received his fake accusations against me. The response was immediate and devastating. By noon, Dominic had received cease and desist orders on 3 active projects. By evening, he was facing potential lawsuits from 2 homeowners whose properties he'd damaged with substandard work. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I drove to the house where Dominic and Susie were staying, a rental on the outskirts of town, since their own house was still on the market. I could see lights on inside and 2 figures moving around in what looked like an argument. I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, within an hour, Dominic came storming out of the house, got in his truck, and drove off into the night, probably heading to the bar to drink away his troubles. I waited another few minutes, then walked up to the front door and knocked. Susie answered, her eyes red from crying. "Greg, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk about your husband's recent activities." "I don't know what you mean." "The fake evidence he sent to my clients, the doctored photos, the false receipts. Did you help him with that, Susie?" She looked around nervously, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "He's lost his mind, Greg. Ever since the festival, he's been obsessed with getting back at you. I tried to talk him out of it, but he won't listen. So you did know about it." "I knew he was planning something, but I didn't know what until it was too late. When I saw what he'd done, I told him he'd gone too far." "And what did he say?" He said he was going to destroy you the same way you destroyed him, that he was going to take away everything you cared about. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. What else is he planning, Susie? I don't know. He won't tell me. But Greg, he's not thinking clearly anymore. He's talking about doing something that will finish this permanently. Where is he now? He went to the bar. He's been drinking every night since the festival, coming home talking about revenge and payback. She grabbed my arm. I'm scared, Greg. Not of you, but of what he might do. Then leave him. Pack your bags and get out of town before he drags you down with him. I can't. He's my husband. He's a man who destroyed your marriage for another woman, then tried to destroy an innocent person's business out of spite. That's not a husband, Susie. That's a liability. I left her standing on the porch and drove home, my mind racing. Dominic was escalating, becoming more desperate and dangerous. The fake evidence scheme had failed, which meant he'd be looking for something more drastic. I was almost home when I smelled the smoke. My house was on fire. I floored the accelerator, my truck skidding around the corner onto my street. The Victorian that I'd spent years restoring was engulfed in flames, orange light dancing against the night sky. Fire trucks were already on scene, but it was too late to save the structure. I parked across the street and watched 15 years of work turn to ash and smoke. Everything I owned, every memory, every piece of my life was disappearing into the night air. I'm sorry, Greg. I turned to see Chief Martinez, the fire department commander. We got here as fast as we could, but it was already too far gone. How did it start? We won't know for sure until the investigation is complete, but it looks like arson. Someone poured accelerant around the foundation and lit it up. I didn't need an investigation to know who was responsible. Any witnesses? Mrs. Patterson across the street saw a pickup truck speeding away about 20 minutes before the fire was reported. She couldn't make out the license plate, but she said it looked like a blue Ford. Dominic drove a blue Ford. I stood there for another hour, watching the fire department finish their work. When there was nothing left but a smoking ruin, I got back in my truck and drove to the River Mill bar. Dominic was there, sitting at the far end of the bar with a whiskey in his hand and a satisfied smirk on his face. He looked up when I walked in, and his smirk widened. Hey there, Greg. I heard you had some excitement at your place tonight. The entire bar went quiet. Every conversation stopped, every head turned in our direction. They could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. You burned down my house. It wasn't a question. Did I? That's a serious accusation. I hope you have proof. I walked slowly across the room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I don't need proof, Dom. Everyone in this room knows what you did, just like they know what kind of man you are. What kind of man am I, Greg? The kind who destroys other people's property when he can't handle being beaten fair and square. The kind who tries to frame innocent people when his pathetic revenge schemes fail. The kind who burns down a man's home because he's too much of a coward to face him directly. Dominic stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol. You think you're so much better than me? I know I am. I've always known it. That's why you've spent 20 years trying to prove otherwise. Your house looked real pretty when it was burning, lit up the whole neighborhood. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Several people pulled out their phones, recording the conversation. You just confessed to arson in front of 30 witnesses, I said calmly. Prove it. Prove I was anywhere near your house tonight. I don't have to prove anything. You just did it for me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His face went white as he understood what he'd just done. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. You're proud of what you did. Proud that you burned down an innocent man's home because your feelings got hurt. I turned to address the room. Everyone here just heard Dominic Vega confess to committing arson. You all heard him brag about burning down my house. I want you to remember this moment when the police ask you what happened here tonight. Dominic looked around the room at all the hostile faces, finally understanding that he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear my next words. You just committed a felony, Dom. You're going to prison. Your life in this town is over. And when you get out in 5 to 10 years, I'll still be here. And I'll still be better than you. I turned and walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him one more time. The house always wins, Dom. And tonight, I was the house,